There's a saying, the lion doesn't roar to prove it's a lion. It just walks, and everything else understands. In the same way, a strong woman doesn't shout to prove her worth. She doesn't scream to demand respect. She doesn't need to speak louder to show she matters. She silences the room with her presence, with her grace, and with the calm dignity of her character. You see, in today's world, we've confused noise with power. But true power, it's quiet, it's still, and when you meet a truly strong woman, she doesn't need to raise her voice. Her silence speaks volumes. Let me take you through a journey of what silent strength really looks like. And by the end of this talk, I promise you'll start valuing your silence more than your explanation. There's something extraordinary about a woman who knows how to stay silent when the world expects her to react. In a society where everyone seems to be in a rush to respond, defend, or shout louder than the other, a strong woman understands the rare and sacred power of silence. She doesn't need to scream to get attention or raise her voice to make a point, because her presence, her calmness, and her clarity already do all the talking. You see, silence is not about muting yourself, it's about mastering yourself. When things go wrong, when people speak behind her back, when others doubt her abilities, she doesn't go around explaining, shouting, or proving anything. She smiles, she walks away. Why? Because she knows that energy is precious, and wasting it on things that won't matter in a week, a month, or a year is not strength. It's distraction. A woman rooted in her truth carries herself like the ocean, still on the surface, yet powerful beneath. Her silence is not emptiness, it's full of awareness. She knows exactly what is happening, but she chooses not to participate in every battle that comes her way. It's not that she doesn't feel anger or pain or betrayal. She does. But instead of reacting in the heat of the moment, she processes, she feels, and then she releases it with dignity. Think of a moment in your life when someone wronged you, and everything inside you wanted to scream, to argue, to justify yourself. But then something deeper whispered, "It's not worth it," and you stayed silent. Do you remember the power you felt after that? Not the silence of weakness, but the silence of victory. That's the kind of strength this world doesn't understand enough. We're often told that being loud means being confident, that if you're quiet, you're passive or afraid. But a strong woman knows better. She knows that the loudest person in the room is often the most insecure. True confidence doesn't need to echo, it just is. You can feel it when she walks in, not because she makes noise, but because she brings peace. There's a story of a girl who was constantly judged for her choices. People would whisper when she walked by, criticize her silently or loudly. She never responded, not once. She focused on her work, her growth, and her joy. Years later, she was celebrated, not because she fought everyone back, but because she stayed silent and let her results do the talking. That's the strength we're talking about. That's silence in action. In your daily life, you will be misunderstood, you will be misjudged, you will be provoked, but you always have a choice. Do you jump into every fire that someone lights in your path, or do you walk past it knowing that your purpose is bigger than their opinion? The strong woman chooses the latter. She knows her worth is not up for public debate. it is sealed inside her. Silence also brings an incredible kind of clarity. When you stop reacting, you start seeing. You notice who really stands with you and who only shows up when things are easy. You begin to separate noise from truth. A woman who practices silence becomes a woman who sees through people, situations, and her own emotions with crystal clarity. She is not fooled by sweet words or loud arguments. She listens to the energy, the intention, and the silence behind the noise. People often try to test her, thinking her silence is ignorance. But it's not, it's awareness. She hears everything. She understands more than they realize. But she chooses peace over proving herself, because a strong woman knows that shouting back doesn't win you respect. It just shows you've lost control, and she is too rooted, too grounded, and too wise for that. There's a beautiful strength in knowing where to place your energy. Not every comment deserves your answer. Not every situation needs your reaction. Not every person is worth your explanation. A strong woman understands that energy is her currency, and she spends it wisely. She knows that peace is expensive, and she's not willing to trade it for momentary satisfaction or the illusion of being right. In daily life, we often get pulled into drama, arguments, unnecessary conversations, and emotional roller coasters simply because we feel the need to respond. Someone says something negative about us, and instantly we feel the urge to prove them wrong. A colleague tries to take credit for our work, and we want to expose them. A loved one misunderstands our silence and questions our loyalty, and we feel the need to explain everything. But in the process, we lose something even more valuable: our peace, our center, our clarity. A strong woman is not someone who never feels the pull of these situations. She does. She hears the insult. She notices the betrayal. She feels the tension. But instead of reacting, she pauses. She asks herself, is this worth my energy? And most of the time, the answer is no. That pause, that question, it's a sign of deep inner maturity. Because strength is not just about how much you can carry, but about how much you can let go. There's a story of a woman in a corporate job who faced a lot of workplace politics. People would take credit for her ideas, some would talk behind her back, and others would try to make her feel small. She had every right to call them out, every reason to fight back. But instead, she focused on her work. She knew that fighting small minds would make her smaller. So she stayed silent, stayed consistent, and let her results speak for her. Months later, when promotions were announced, her name was the only one on the list. People were shocked, but she wasn't. She had spent her energy building, not breaking. That's the art of a strong woman. She doesn't chase applause. She doesn't chase revenge. She doesn't chase approval. She understands that her power lies in where and how she invests her time, focus, and emotions. And she chooses not to pour them into people or problems that don't align with her growth. Imagine waking up with only a certain amount of energy for the day. Like carrying a small pouch of light, you can choose to shine it on things that matter. Your goals, your health, your family, or your passions. Or you can scatter it on arguments, worries, overthinking, and trying to fix people who don't want to be fixed. A strong woman makes that choice every morning, often without saying a word. She simply chooses what deserves her and what does not. This strength also shows in relationships. A strong woman knows when to speak and when to stay silent. She doesn't engage in blame games. She doesn't force anyone to understand her value. She gives space. She observes. She lets people reveal their intentions through their actions, not their words. And when she feels that her energy is being drained instead of nourished, she steps back. Not in anger, but in wisdom. She chooses herself not to hurt others, but to protect her own soul. People often confuse silence with weakness, but what they don't see is the self-discipline it takes to stay calm in chaos. It's easy to yell. It's easy to post a long rant on social media. It's easy to argue endlessly. But it takes character to say, "This is not where I will place my energy." It takes grace to walk away from a battle you could easily win, simply because you know winning it would cost you your peace. There's also another kind of energy that strong women manage. Emotional energy. They are deeply aware of what thoughts, what people, and what environments drain them. So they learn to say no. They learn to create boundaries, not because they are cold, but because they are wise. They've learned, sometimes the hard way, that being too available, too understanding, too forgiving, too reactive, only leaves them empty. So now, they protect their emotional energy like a sacred flame. They don't let just anyone blow it out. In your own life, think of how many times you've given your energy away to people or situations that never deserved it. That argument you still think about. That person you tried so hard to please. That explanation you gave to someone who had already made up their mind. Now imagine what would have happened if you had stayed silent instead. If you had smiled and walked away. If you had chosen yourself instead of wasting your light on someone who preferred darkness. This is the kind of shift that happens when a woman steps into her true strength. She no longer reacts from ego. She responds from awareness. She no longer gives energy to chaos. She becomes the calm. And in that calmness, she becomes magnetic, because everyone is drawn to peace. Everyone is drawn to someone who holds herself with that kind of grace. So, don't waste your energy trying to prove your worth. Don't spend your light on those who cannot see. A strong woman protects her energy because she knows it is her power, her peace, and her path to purpose. Respect is not something you demand, it's something you command through the way you carry yourself. And often, the most powerful way to do that is not by raising your voice, but by lowering your noise. A strong woman understands this deeply. She knows that the world pays more attention to presence than to volume. She doesn't feel the need to enter a room and announce her worth. She doesn't try to dominate conversations or outshine others by force. Instead, she walks in silently, with quiet confidence, and suddenly people notice. They feel something in her energy. There's no need for performance, no need for approval. Her grace speaks louder than words ever could. In a world where everyone is trying to be heard, she stands out by simply being still. Because when you're calm, you become rare. When you're rare, you become respected. And when you're respected, you don't have to explain yourself to anyone. That's the elegance of a woman who knows her value. She is rooted, not in ego, but in self-awareness. She doesn't let the noise outside disturb the peace she has built inside. And because of that, her silence becomes a message. Clear, bold, and undeniable. Think of a courtroom. Everyone is talking. The lawyers, The witness is the audience. But when the judge enters, everything stops. No shouting, no chaos, just silence. Why? Because the authority doesn't scream. It commands respect through its very presence. That's what a strong woman is like. She doesn't need to speak loudly to make a point. She lives in a way that makes a point, quietly. Many people think that raising your voice shows strength. But in truth, it often reveals insecurity. A woman who shouts is trying to be seen. A woman who silences the room just by walking in. She has already seen herself. She knows who she is. She doesn't need to broadcast it. Her respect doesn't come from proving herself to others. It comes from being so deeply connected to her own truth that she doesn't need the world to validate it. In daily life, this power shows up in subtle yet unforgettable ways. Maybe she's in a meeting where others are interrupting and trying to lead the discussion. She stays quiet, listens, and when she finally speaks, the room goes still. Not because she demanded attention, but because her words carry weight, and her silence carried grace before she even spoke. Or maybe in a family situation where drama and conflict swirl around, she refuses to raise her voice. Instead, she responds with clarity and calm, and everyone realizes this is real strength. There was a young woman who was in a long-term relationship. The man she loved started to disrespect her in subtle ways, interrupting her, dismissing her ideas, making decisions without including her. Friends told her to confront him, to argue, to shout if she had to. But she didn't. Instead, she had one honest, calm conversation where she shared her feelings clearly and respectfully. When nothing changed, she didn't beg, she didn't scream, she left, quietly, with dignity. That silence shook him more than any screaming match ever could. Because it wasn't just about the words. It was the silence of a woman who knows what she deserves and refuses to settle for less. That's the kind of power the world remembers. Not the one who makes the most noise, but the one who moves with purpose, with grace, with quiet strength. A strong woman becomes magnetic not because of how she talks, but because of how she carries her silence. Her eyes don't beg for respect, they command it. Her walk doesn't scream for attention, it draws it. Her calmness in chaos becomes a mirror for others to see their own lack of control. And in that mirror, they realize just how powerful she truly is. We live in a time where silence is misunderstood. People think if you're not shouting, you're not brave. If you're not defending yourself, you're not strong. But that couldn't be further from the truth. True strength is knowing you could scream, but choosing not to. You could fight, but choosing peace. You could explain yourself, but choosing stillness. When a woman becomes that deeply rooted in herself, her silence begins to do something magical. It protects her. It elevates her. It clears her path of anything and anyone that does not align with her energy. And most importantly, it teaches the world how to treat her. Not because she told them, but because she showed them. So if you ever doubt the power of your presence, remember this: you don't need to raise your voice to be heard. You don't need to shout to gain respect. Sometimes the lewdest thing in the room is the woman who says nothing at all, because her silence is not empty. It's full of wisdom, strength, boundaries, and truth. And that is the kind of silence that doesn't just speak, it echoes.